Rosicky. We know from the beginning of the story that he is got a heart problem, and the point of view is the doctor. It's third person, but sometimes it's from his looking at him, and sometimes it's from looking at the doctor. So in the beginning, it starts really starts kind of looking at the situation from the doctor's point of view. So he tells the doctor comes. He's visiting the doctor. He tells neighbor Rosicky that he's got a problem with his heart and he has to settle down and not do so much farming. So I'm going to read a little bit just because this is what Willa Cather does. She lets us know through her descriptions what is it, everything that we need to know about a person's personality, pretty much. All right. The old farmer looked up at the doctor with a gleam of amusement in his queer triangular shaped eyes. His eyes were large and lively, but the lids were caught up in the middle in a curious way, so that they formed a triangle. He did not look like a sick man. His brown face was creased but not wrinkled. He had a ruddy color in his smooth-shaven cheeks and his lips under his long brown mustache. His hair was thin and ragged around the ears, but very little gray. His forehead, naturally high and crossed by deep parallel lines, now ran all the way up to his pointed crown. Rosicky's face had the habit of looking interested and suggested a contented disposition and a reflective quality that was gay rather than grave. This gave him a certain detachment, the easy manner of an onlooker and observer. So some of the themes in this story have to do with, there's themes looking at money and wealth, and whether it's personal wealth or whether it's monetary wealth, whether you actually have money or whether you don't, but you're wealthy in other ways. Lots of things about family. He cares very deeply about his family and his sons. Being self-sufficient is another thing. Neighbor Rosicky wanted and wants his sons to be self-sufficient because coming from, he's an immigrant coming from, and he moved first to London and then to New York. And then after living there for quite a while and enjoying himself, he realized he was always going to be working for the man or someone. And that was sort of, he didn't feel self-sufficient. He didn't own anything in that way. So he moved out to the Great Plains and began farming. He thought he would just farm there for a while and work, but he ended up being able to buy some land. He got married. He had a wonderful wife. She was a country girl. He was a city boy, but he really preferred the country. One of the reasons he preferred the country is because he felt that the city had a lot of evils, right? And that the meanness and the baseness of humanity often emerged in cities, and he really wanted his sons not to have to experience that. I'm going to read a little bit about, so you can see where Cather is comparing the idea of wealth and happiness, like wealth doesn't make you happy necessarily. This is after he's reminiscing about a time he went and delivered this woman's baby, but afterwards they didn't offer him breakfast, and so he went. Well, I think they did offer it to him. They might have offered it to him, but he didn't stay there because the atmosphere wasn't friendly, or it wasn't welcoming, and it was shabby, but in a way that just was kind of cold, I think. So he went to the doctor's house instead, and they offered him breakfast. Okay, let's see. Well, only last winter he had had such a good breakfast at Rosicky's. I'm sorry, the doctor went to Rosicky's, and that only when he needed it. He had been out all night on a long, hard confinement case in Tom Marshall's, a big, rich farm where there was plenty of stock and plenty of feed and a great deal of expensive farm machinery of the newest model, and no comfort whatever. So they weren't happy just because they had all this stuff. The woman had too many children and too much work, and she was no manager. When the baby was born at last and handed over to the assisting neighbor woman, and the mother was properly attended to, Burley refused any breakfast in that slovenly house and drove his buggy. The snow was too deep for a car, 8 miles to Anton Rosicky's house, hence the main character of the story. He didn't know another farmhouse where a man could get such a warm welcome and such a good, strong coffee with rich cream. No wonder the old chap didn't want to give up his coffee. So he's considered Bohemian, which was a place called Bohemia at that time. He's Czechoslovakian, though. And so another thing I was going to point out to us in class was that Mary, that's Rosicky's wife, is very, very excited about being able to feed people. Like, she loves feeding her family, feeding the doctor, and makes this really warm setting. I think if you know people who are feeders, I can be a feeder at times, but maybe grandmothers, mothers, aunts, people like that, who just, the minute they see you, they want to feed you. And that's just a very welcoming thing. The other thing is, the neighbors sometimes talk about Rosicky as being not very wealthy, or not working so hard that he keeps gaining more and more, because he's more laid back. He works, they work all the time. He's just not like he's lazy. But he's not striving for, he feels like he has everything he needs, which is his family. And the one thing that he cares about the most, he's not very interested in taking care of his heart, although he does it for his family. He tries to do less work because they asked him to please, not risk his health. But the thing that he really cares about the most, and I think the main crux of the story, because we learn about his background, and Cather's very detailed in when she's discussing his life in London, which was very awful, and his life in New York. And, so we see what he learned from those places and how they partially helped shape him. Now, the problem in his family is that his son married a woman who was not an immigrant from the Czechoslovakia or anywhere. And he feels like he's worried that she's not happy because she's a town girl, and now she has to work really hard and stay on a little farm. And their relationship is rocky, and that's what worries Rosicky. His son thinks he might want to leave farming because it's so hard, and the crops keep failing. He thinks he might want to leave farming, but and go work for someone else, and that very much worries Rosicky because he feels like he'll be a slave to, just a worker, and it won't make them happier in the end. So, well, in the beginning, Polly, the daughter-in-law, seems like she is kind of unhappy, and she's also distrustful of Rosicky and his family. She doesn't know any immigrants, and she doesn't know how to act with them. So Rosicky, after trying to help them by loaning them their car so they can go to the movies and doing her dishes for her and things like that, finally breaks through to her when he actually he basically goes in and plows or tries to rake up all the tumbleweeds, and that's too much work. So he has another heart attack, and she's the one, and he's on her property and his son Rudy's property when he has the heart attack, and she's the one who comes to help him, and she's the one who connects with him finally, and he connects with her. And when that happens, he feels finally good. He realizes he's the first person who she tells that she's going to have a baby, and he feels like he finally connected, and she's finally happy, and she finally starts calling him Papa, and she's more content. And when he finds out she's more content, it's as if he gives himself the permission to die. He has another heart attack the next day and dies, but he dies happy because his family's happy, and that's what he cares about. He says, let's see. Also, in the story, there's a graveyard which abuts his property. It's a very beautiful, comforting place, and there's foreshadowing in the story when it's first brought up. This is when Rosicky's. Let's see. Is this when he? Yeah. This is when Rosicky first talks about the brick graveyard. It was a nice graveyard, Rosicky reflected, sort of snug and home-like, not cramped or mournful. A big sweep all round it. A man could lie down on the long grass and see the complete arch of the sky over him, hear the wagon go by, In summer, the mowing machine rattled right up to the wire fence, and it was so near home. Over there across the corn stalks, his own roof and windmill looked so good to him that he promised himself to mind the doctor and take care of himself. So he has a connection with this graveyard. So he says it's a nice place for someone to be buried. And in the end, the doctor, after he finds out that Rosicky's died, goes to the family to give them his condolences and goes by the graveyard and has a similar kind of reflection about the peacefulness of the place. Now, let me see. I want to read what he thinks about the city. Rosicky, the old Rosicky, could remember as if it were yesterday, the day when the young Rosicky found out what was the matter with him. It was on the 4th of July afternoon, and he was sitting in Park Place in the sun. The lower part of New York was empty. Wall Street, Liberty Street, Broadway, all empty. So much stone and asphalt with nothing going on. So many empty windows. The emptiness was intense, like the stillness in a great factory when the machinery stops and the belts and bands cease running. It was too great a change. It took all the strength out of one. Those blank buildings with the stream, without the stream of life pouring through them, were like empty jails. It struck young Rosicky that this was the trouble with big cities. They built you in from the earth itself, cemented you away from the contact with the ground. You lived in an unnatural world, like the fish in an aquarium, who were probably much more comfortable than they ever were in the sea. So that's his, and he, throughout the story, when he's reflecting about life there and how hungry he was at times and how hard the life sometimes there made women mean and men, devious and cruel, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so I'm gonna leave you there and maybe we'll talk about it a little next time, but look at the module or the discussion board post where I tell you, I'm going to put it on the discussion board, what to do for your writing assignment, which is more of a creative writing assignment. So I'll see you next week.